Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Today is a really special episode because today this podcast gets a makeover and a new identity in the world, which for anyone who's done identity work on the personal level knows it's a whole thing. There's there's energy, there's power, there's an inherent pivot when we shift our understanding of who we are. And our businesses, if we have our own businesses, go through that. And parts of our business, parts of our service go through that. And if you've been around here for a while, you know that the Magical Humaning podcast, while it was under that name, was really focused on the individual work of reclaiming our full human magic, which is an ongoing lifelong process. I don't pretend there's an end, but it was really focused on personal growth, personal perspectives, relationships. And of course I would speak to how that has a natural ripple effect and how that is a form of embodied activism when we do our own healing work, when we reclaim our authenticity in a world that teaches us to conform and self-abandon. And in my own personal evolution, which our purpose within us is always evolving if we let it, I've realized that my journey started years ago. If you don't know my story, my journey started as wanting to be a farm worker activist. I double majored in Spanish and Latin American studies. I did my full undergrad senior project on things like farm worker labor, Monsanto, and the systems and structures that were dehumanizing to people who were really um, staples in our system and in helping us meet our needs, and they weren't treated fairly, and even the environmental part was not treated fairly, right? So that's where I started, and it was through this lily pad hop of purpose over the years, becoming a middle school Spanish teacher for a year, realizing that I couldn't bear to teach from a textbook that didn't allow me to talk culture as much as I wanted to. But I found myself talking to the kids about their emotions and their relationships a lot. So then, of course, I became a therapist and then got a bit disenchanted with that paradigm. Even though I was doing good work within it, I was kind of skating the edges of more innovative approaches, but it still at a point felt too tight. So then I went into coaching, which allowed me much more space to play and explore and serve without being confined by that medical model system. But then even there, I've been sitting with the feeling of there's a growing urgency in me, and not urgency that's sort of fear motivated, but urgency like I've gathered all of these tools. I've lived some very hard earned wisdom and lessons, and I want to share them. And I want to share them more widely. I want to make this way of moving through life where we reclaim our human magic, our creative intelligence, and we intentionally use that as we're creating new system structures, leadership models, community ecosystems of how we all fit together. And what I know in my being, in my body, is as humans, we tend to try to build the new thing with the building blocks that are familiar from the old thing. And that's not inherently bad. That's not inherently wrong. I don't really want to stand in the place of either or good, bad about this. But what I know is, if you're using the same five ingredients to cook a meal every time, you can make several different things, but it's all going to taste a little bit the same. Actually, a lot the same, right? So this podcast and the work that I'm doing in the world, which the website development and restructuring of all of my offerings and things like that is taking longer than the podcast rebrand. So stay tuned. We're not there yet. This is the first wave of this new identity and my new clarified service in the world. But Imaginal change asks us to use what we know, use who we've become, use the wisdom, use our full multidimensional humanity, but then also tap into something we've never felt before, never seen before, never proven that it's possible, to very intentionally use our imagination to reframe things like crumbling, right? Whether it's personal or collective, when a version of our lives, a version of our story, or an external system or structure is failing, it is painful. There is no question. It is deeply painful. It is often harmful. And imaginal change as a lens asks us to say, yes, and what is being clarified through this process? What can I imagine if I let go of what I think I should and what I have to and what I'm familiar with? And calling ourselves into this other space, the imaginal realm in a way. It's like there's a ton of metaphors, right? So if I was building with the same five types of Lego blocks, and I had a lot of them, I could build a lot of things for sure. But then if somebody came over and dropped some doors and windows and little Lego people and all those fun, quirky Legos, all of a sudden this whole new world would open up. But we have to be willing to, I don't even know how to say this, to not know what we don't know and to be receptive to something new. And it's interesting in my work, I've walked a really sometimes clunky, sometimes easy, intuitive line around the magical part of my work and how I show up with people and how I show up with my own in my own life. And I've spent years just knowing that there is magic. There's magic within us. We're collaborating with the magic of life. And I've used that word magic. And because I'm not a particularly religious person, I've always been curious about world religions and how people connect to the divine, the energy of love, the higher intelligence of all that is, whatever that is. But I've never fit into a box, so I chose magic as the word to speak to that most often. And I've had to learn how to trust that without science. I use neuroscience to help me ground things like how our intuition works and how we show up in the world and in relationship, and it affirms our humanity because we have brains, we have nervous systems. They have modes that they default to. But I didn't have it so much for the magic, the trust, the intentional surrender to a higher intelligence, the leaning into what I don't know until recently. And I've been reading the book The Awakened Brain by Dr. Miller. And I believe it's Lisa Miller. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doubting myself on that. I believe it's Lisa Miller. And it's been really cool because there is now extensive research on how building that connection with something beyond us literally reshapes our brain. And not only does it reshape our brain, period, right? It shows it has an impact, but it reshapes our brain and restructures our brain and reinforces areas of our brain that are specifically connected to more creativity, the ability to innovate, a wider perspective, They are a brain that has that relationship is more resistant to patterns around depression, anxiety, and addiction. There's so much now proven benefit to building a connection with the imaginal realm that I can't not weave that into this work. And one, it was really validating for me. It was really, I love a grounded tether, not because I need that proof. I think part of my spiritual soul school was trust it without it. My journey with human design started that way. I tried to resist it, and I just kept getting called back to it by life through, it showed up on my path. And time again, when I would explore it, it just felt so right, so true, so surgically efficient at pointing to what I needed to know to step into myself more fully, who I actually am, and to advocate for what I need in the world, in relationship, and how to move toward a sense of purpose that is uniquely mine. So similarly, and then I learned about the quantum science behind that type of archetypal tool and why it why it gets there so efficiently. So oftentimes in life, I think we have to trust first and then we get the proof in hindsight, whether through experience or through something intellectual like research or science. But the imaginal change approach requires that we sort of hold it all. We get surrendered by life. We have stuff we can't control, again, on the individual and the collective level. We're jarred by it, we're jolted, we're taken off kilter. And then in that moment between that jolt and moving forward, that's the space that I am committed to really working with people in. That space of pure potential where the old story, the old program has been compromised. And there is a moment right there where we as humans have two really natural responses. And a lot of it depends on sort of how we've been living before then, which one we reach for. But we can have a real tendency, and again, our brain naturally does this, to reach for a sense of security, to try to control, to try to get something back to the way it was, to try to contain something through slapping a label on it or creating a cute little package for what just happened. I've done this more times than I can count. I will do it many more times than I can count. So there's no, you get to be one person or the other. So there's that. I want to reach. Life just got really scary and I got really disoriented. I'm going to reach there. And then there's this other approach that requires first pausing, sitting with what's real, feeling what it is so that all that disorienting energy that might be rooted in grief or anger or anxiety or fear, whatever it is, can actually move through the system. And then there is a space where I observe, again, in my own life and with clients, that pressure, that disorientation creates a space, if we allow there to be space, for some clarity. And not clarity like, oh, this is the plan, I'm going to now control life this way, but clarity about what matters. What what have we been deprioritizing in our lived experience that this jolt, this crisis, this loss, whatever it is now allowing us to see with clear eyes. And then from there, when we build, when we move with that in mind, when we connect, when we attract with that in mind, it's different. It's not a repetition of the same old stuff. Not to say we won't keep repeating our patterns. To be clear, I'm going to keep part of this work is knowing that we're all in soul school. We're going to keep rinsing and repeating a lot of our core lessons because that's what we're here to do. We're not here to get beyond it and transcend it and have this perfect life without struggle. We're here to create more peace and ease with ourselves in the midst of it all. And, or that's what I believe. And when we can meet these disruptions differently, when we can meet these losses differently, when we can create the space and hold it as not only something that just kind of naturally happens sometimes, but hold it as sacred. Like I'm not allowing myself to charge forward from a place of fear and trying to manage life according to what I think it should be. I'm going to pause. I'm going to get curious. I'm going to see what feels true now that maybe I wasn't so connected with before this thing happened in life or in the world. And we've seen this time and time again. On the personal level, I've seen it in my own life through both of my divorces have been very clarifying experiences. They've been very hard, very challenging in different ways, but also I have met new parts of myself and new parts of my purpose through both of them that I couldn't have met if I was just on this very um, uninterrupted achievement success path, let's say. And I say success on all fronts. I needed that. I needed the struggle. I needed to be surrendered. I needed to commit deeply and then realize that I had to let something go in order for me to reckon with some things that I never would have seen, that I never would have called up within myself. And we can look at things like 9/11, tragic, undeniably a horrific experience. And not to say that horrible thing just had this perfect little path of all great things happening afterwards. That's not the case. But there were some really beautiful things that happen. When you hear stories about people who have been living in this rat race type life in high rises and trying to climb the ladder and all of this, and then within moments, they were just people coming together in connection, sharing resources in this space of community and love. There were so many stories of that. There were also people who were reacting to their fear and casting blame and judgment, right? There's a both and of this, but I don't think we get to have those moments of remembering what really is important to us as humans, which I believe is connection with ourselves and each other and the energy of love. I know that sounds really oversimplified, but I think when it comes down to it, that's what brings us a sense of meaning. That's what brings us a sense of ability to be brave in the face of challenges, ability to trust ourselves and each other. And so, without continuing to swirl around in this, as you can tell, I can, and I love talking about it. That's where I'm going. And that's where this podcast is going, is really talking about how do we reimagine the world as systems and structures continue to fail? How do we reimagine our own lives so that we're living beyond the limitations we were taught that may or may not be accurate? And how do we trust the magic of not only the messy in-betweens of life and our identities and our stories, but the magic that is beyond our human will? the potential that is beyond our intellect. And how do we build a world with all of that? Build a business with all of that, build a program with all of that, build a community with all of that. Because I believe that when we do that, when we start thinking like that, the amount of creative potential we have as humans is mind-blowing. We've got these I don't know mechanic talk, but I know there's a thing you can put on like a motorcycle that makes it only go so fast. There's a name for it. Somebody out there knows it. It's like we've got one of those on our creative potential that we just inherited from the cultural stories of life. The shoulds, the whatever. We've inherited it. No shame, no blame at this point. Just it is. But we can take it off through practice. We can liberate some of our creative energy and potential as well as widening our lens on life. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about this always in this both and of me and the collective and how that's influencing me and purpose and being brave to do things a new way and in a world where that can be really scary. So in this season, especially, I'm going to be sharing conversations with other voices who, in my view, are doing the work of imagining a new world, a new way through their lives and their work in the world or their service in the world, the way they move, their embodied leadership. And a reminder, if you haven't been in my orbit long, leadership is not about being in front of or higher than or better than. There's none of that. Leadership is our purpose manifest in the world. That's what it is to me. Our true self doing what it's here to do in the world. So reimagining leadership as a chorus of unique voices with unique purpose coming together to share gifts, share perspective, share energy, right? In human design, we talk a lot about the different energy types and how we need each other in the ecosystem to really create efficiently and without so much burnout. So we're going to have a lot of conversations about that. And it's not an answer, but I believe that when we listen to people and really witness their stories, their why, their struggles, their magic, that it awakens something within us that we cannot find when we're trying to figure everything out in a vacuum. When we're living that story that so many of us got, I know I did, that it's my job to figure out my life by myself and I shouldn't bother people. I think a lot of us have that, even if it's unconscious. And so I'm hoping these conversations serve to affirm and awaken things within you. So stay tuned. I'm very excited about this. And I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful that you are curious about this way. It is it is a really exciting and vulnerable thing for me to step into this place. It's interesting. I've actually got emotion coming up. I didn't expect that. I, every time I have a creative evolution, I have doubt. I have doubt, that I'm ready. But more than that, because my unique wounds and stuff is around like, will this resonate? Will this serve? Does this matter? So the fact that you're here and and sticking with me through yet another evolution or joining me maybe anew for this part of my journey means the world. And I do believe that this is my community. This I've been really clear that I'm never willing to make my podcast something that has an agenda. I've done other things in my business that were really strategic for marketing and things like that. But this podcast is my love letter to the world. This podcast has to be joyful for me to do it. And so it's going to remain that way with the foundational belief that sharing from that place and having other people share from that place is better medicine than probably any framework I could give you. And I got frameworks. I got those coming too. But there's something really sacred about sharing the human experience. And that's what this is. That's what the goal of this is. So I appreciate you. And I'm sure if you're listening, I'm sure if you've made it through this whole episode, that you're somebody who has a deep desire to contribute something beautiful to the world. And as I close, I just want to remind you how much that matters. It's really easy to feel insignificant when the world feels like it's a dumpster fire. But where we place our focus gets amplified in our awareness and is where we manifest from. So, focusing on the dumpster fire exclusively will lead to feeling like the whole world is a dumpster fire. We cannot ignore it, but focusing on your brilliant spark, your unique wisdom, your just special flavor of love that you bring, when you're going through the checkout at the grocery store, all of that is sacred service. And I just want to remind you how much that matters.